Дорогие друзья, в Большом театре сейчас происходит очень важное событие. Мы выпускаем оперу «Lohengrin». Ее не было на нашей сцене с 1936 года. И это постановка совместная с Метрополитен-опера. И к нам приехал постановщик, режиссер Франсуа Жирар. Человек, прославившийся и в кино, и своими постановками Вагнера. Вы, может быть, тоже смотрели его фильмы «Шелк» и фильм «Красная скрипка». И сейчас для Франсуа это уже 4-я постановка именно Вагнера. И делает он это для Большого театра. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to introduce our guest of today, François Girard. He came to Bolshoi as we are doing a very important production in Bolshoi, production of Lohengrin, which last time was heard here at 1936. And François Girard is famous in the movies as he did numbers of wonderful films, and among them Silk and Red Violin. But also in the theater, it will be his 4th Wagner production, and he does it now for Bolshoi and Metropolitan Opera co-production. So I'm very pleased to welcome him in our green room. Thank you, Francois,
that you for having me.
Time and came here. Was of course trying to prepare myself, reading your biography, but couldn't find exactly your formation. I understood you were born in Canada and you were studying music, but I don't understand directly your path, neither to the movies nor to the opera field.
Yeah, like it's a little bit, I would say my training is a little underground. I did a lot of music when I was young. And I came, then I studied communication, and I became a video artist and did all sort of experimental work at the time.
All that in Canada?
All that in Canada, Montreal, Quebec. And then the work became more and more narrative, and for a good 15 years, I really concentrated on feature films, and because it demands that kind of attention. And then again, I started to work multiple fields at the same time. Started in my first opera, Oedipus Rex, Stravinsky, and Symphony of Psalms, and then theater.
For where was it staged, Stravinsky?
At the Canadian Opera Company, and that was a very, very happy production. And I got immediately hooked to the adrenaline of the life experience. And
when you said you were doing music, you mean you were playing piano or some other instruments?
Yeah, but I've always played piano, but I'm a dilettante. I'm a closet pianist, and I'm really not public at all. But music is very dear to me, and as most directors, I would say. But
so you can read the scores.
I can read the scores, and there's a times when I was writing some music, and but my career is really a director career.
But did you study directing as a?
Yes, and then trained with directors. I was an apprentice and then an assistant. And then I became my own big fish in a very small aquarium, started my own production companies, and we had the collective of colleagues, then started doing all sort of work. And that was, in a way, also my school. Like, we were doing architecture films, dance videos, we were all over the place, commercials, experimental narratives, art videos, installations. And for years like that, I've been working in multiple fields, different genre, and then I focused onto feature film.
And who brought you first to the theater in your family? What was it, your first theatrical experience? What have you seen?
Well, I can talk about the first film, which is one kind of theater. I'm the last of 4. And the 2 sisters and my brother are quite separated in age, so I'm quite behind them. And I grew up in a very small town in Quebec called Saint-Félicien. And for years, 3 or 4 years, every Saturday with my dad, I would drive my sisters and my brother to see a movie, and I would see them so excited to go. But I was too young, so I wouldn't get in. And then we would pick them up later, and they would be even more excited. So for 3 or 4 years, I grew this fantasy of what was happening in that building. For me, like, it was magical. And I grew this vision that you would get in there and it would elevate to the sky. And I had all these crazy ideas about what cinema would do to the people walking in. and I eventually had my first film session, and I was very disappointed. And I'm trying, since then, I think, even in theater, I'm trying, I guess my belief that magic is possible in the theater goes back to that time. And I'm trying to retrieve that childhood dream that everything is possible in the theater, whether you're presenting a film or a play or an opera, like we're going to do here.
But I understand, I don't know if it's so for you, but I guess, of course, that film language and theater language is very different. The illusion which you create in the film is quite different from what you can create on stage.
Yeah, but language, as Orson Welles said, like film language you can learn in 3 days. What's longer, I guess, to learn is the communication between people. What you have to say, what you want to say, what you want to communicate, and create this connection between performers and the public. And that is a long-term project. And whether you do it on the pre-recorded form of film, or if you do opera or Cirque du Soleil, you always faced in a similar situation where you have to make the best out of a material. In this case, we have Wagner's Lohengrin, and you, with collaborators, like with people like Serge Lamotte, who was my dramaturg, 5 years ago, we were questioning the text. What does it mean? What did he mean, and what could it mean today? Like, how does it can resonate in today's theater? Whether you do that on film, theater, or opera, like for the essential, for the most difficult part, it's pretty much. I feel I'm doing the same work.
But in the film, you can rewrite. I was understanding you were doing the script sometimes for the films, but here in opera you have a very fixed material.
Yes.
In terms of text,
Yeah.
in terms of music,
Yeah.
and of course in terms of Wagner ideas. I don't know how it correlates with your own ideas and how much we can understand ourselves from what Wagner really wanted. And then you're very trapped in these numbers of rules which already exist sort of before you came. So how you deal with that?
Well, there's a time construct in the music that you won't change, although you can change a lot the perception of that time construct. But the score is the score, text is the text. Sometimes in film, I work with it. I'm not writing. Like the last film, The Song of Names, was written by someone else, adapted from a book. There's a relief in not carrying the weight of meanings. There's a relief in just serving a existing material, and like when you do that, probably because I've written my good share of, and I know how draining and demanding it is to write. Probably when I do serve someone else's text, like Lohengrin, Wagner's Lohengrin, I serve it. I'm not trying to impose my own views or my own meanings. I'm here to make that piece communicate with the audience. And I'm actually, in general, quite intolerant when I see directors force their own speech on top or in front of the composer or the lyricist.
Yet you said that you were questioning yourself for numbers of years, what it's about, what it's mean here, etc. You were doing big preparation work to understand the piece Lohengrin and how it can relate to the today audience. Lohengrin, such a mythical story, strange one, quite strange. But what is the core for you in Lohengrin after all the study you did? So what is this you want to convey to today's audience through the Lohengrin?
Well, first of all, it's more than 5 years, my journey with Lohengrin, because it starts with Parsifal. Parsifal, like we're going, nearing 20 years, like between 15 and 20 years that we've been studying, working, staging Parsifal at the Metropolitan Opera. And then when I started working on Lohengrin, we were asking ourselves like all sort of questions, and we did what most directors do, like because of some historical characters, most productions are pushing in the abstract direction to avoid the historicity of Heinrich. And we did that at first, and then I was not satisfied with the result, and I was ready to we actually trashed a whole first concept to actually embrace the fact that Lohengrin is the son of Parsifal. And Parsifal, we know that world, the magical world of the Grail, the magical world of Montsalvat, which we lived in for so many years, and decided that we would continue the story. So Lohengrin, we treat Lohengrin as, I guess, like Wagner would be pretty happy about that, like as the sequel of Parsifal. So Lohengrin being the son of Parsifal, he comes from, it's a little bit like he comes from my production of Parsifal. Mm-hmm. And my production of Parsifal was set in the present, so if the singer is 40 years, we're 40 years into the future. So we're, which opens the possibility of, we're opening a poetical window into our own future. Like, what would it be to live on Earth in 2060 or more?
And what is your perception of that time?
Well, I think I'm an optimist in many different ways, but I think we're facing drastic changes in the years to come, and I think I'm not alone to think like that. There's a vast majority of thinkers who think we will have to change ways, and the world will change. So we're presenting a pretty bleak vision, actually. Like it's dark, but it remains into the poetic world, and this is where we balance the arrival, because Lohengrin is in between a supernatural story, a fantasy. Lohengrin has supernatural powers and arrives into the real world. So through our staging, I think we're balancing both aspects into a very poetical vision of the future.
And for you, he is just somebody from the future. He is a poet, he is a philosopher. What he brings to this world?
He brings light. He brings the light of the Grail, the light of spirituality, and then we present the world as a world that has in great need of that. And then, of course, we're trying to keep it open. Like fundamentally, like what Wagner meant at the time is a confrontation between Christianity and paganism at a time where both were actually in the social environment, like present in a different way that they are today. But essentially, like we have the evil force of Ortrud that is like manipulating the world her own way, and there's a very Shakespearean machine, a dramatic machine at play here, where Ortrud manipulates pretty much everybody on stage to get what she wants, and Lohengrin will eventually defeat her. But essentially, it's the whole play is a confrontation between Lohengrin and Ortrud, Christianity and paganism, or you can name it differently. Like there's no particular Christian accent, but it's the black magic against the power of God.
Well, in the case of our today life, or in life in 40, 60 years, means somebody who brings you some sort of big values instead of consumption ideology, or I don't know, or not like this.
It means that we will always be in need of light. I'm not a religious person at all, but I can value the spirituality, and I can value in some thinkers I can give the value of prophets. I can listen to a voice and know that this voice can guide me. I think we're at this present moment in great need of that. The voices are getting muted by an incredible amount of noise that some might call disinformation, misinformation, whatever you want. Like I think we've lost track of the true voices in all that noise. and I think they will only increase. And I think if you want to look at the piece as a metaphor for that, then I think it's there. People suffering, people being trapped into inhuman conditions need the light, and in the case of Lohengrin, this is what we're trying to highlight.
I understand that among your sort of first films was a film about Glenn Gould.
Yeah.
And it was 32 short films. And I thought when you did it, probably you had this perception that today men cannot fix for a long time. You really need, and I see it in our culture, everything became like a mosaic everywhere. It's like fast, quick, and then you move somewhere else. Though Lohengrin is quite a big piece, how do you think today audience is able to sit in big operas from the beginning to the end?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. And time accelerates. I think our experience of life is increasingly fragmented. As we go, like in the course of my lifetime, I think there's a lot of chopping that's been growing. I think my longest piece ever was Parsifal, and then I came to it like with the experience of Siegfried and others, and I was very focused on that even at the time of Siegfried. And still today with Lohengrin, for me, like there's something very important to do. Like probably one of the biggest impact I can have on the piece is to set time correctly, to adjust the clocks, to bring the audience and the piece and the music into a suspended time, where the notion of length or of a narration being slow disappear, and we just embrace the meditation and we meet in that space. And if you work hard enough on those things and you focus enough, there's also the techniques and concepts that I've developed, but I'm very, very, very obsessed with that. And when you see the overture of, it starts with the overture, and all of these pieces, like here we have a 10-minute overture in music, and this is the time to bring the theater in phase with the time of the story and the length of the piece. And if you manage to succeed, we don't always, but like this is our aim. If an audience, in the case of Parsifal, like people would enter the theater and exit 6 hours later, if you include the intermissions. So if you accept that, if you are first of all granted the privilege of 4,000 people or 2,000 people giving 6 hours of their time collectively at the same time, it becomes very special. Something happens there that can't happen anywhere else. Where do we give more than 6 minutes to anything? And here you have at the Met, Parsifal, like my experience of Parsifal at the Met was like unbelievable. And you see people walk out of the theater, they're in a very special state of mind. Like there is something that unites everybody. It's one form of a grand mass, but it's also stopping and meditating. It's a 6 hours meditation with the most gorgeous music, with all sort of performances on stage. And here again, I think my aim is to, with the overture, establish a time zone where the audience is comfortable and enjoy the slow development and embrace the incredible music of Wagner, and then live the experience of sharing. It would be probably more like 4.5–4:45 minutes altogether, door to door, entering and exiting the theater, and that I think leaves a trace. And especially today, you're right to mention that, like in today's time, anything that lasts more than 10 minutes. Even movies, people now, we see movies like at home and we interrupt and we start cooking and we come back to it. And when do we really sit down in front of anything? More than half an hour, 15 minutes and 2 minutes sometimes.
Exactly. And as you're doing now fourth Wagner in your life, you became like Wagnerian. Do you have sort of special recipe which you use all the time when you have Wagner, or every time you have his new work, you rethink your own art anew, or every time you try to do, let's say, this kind of meditation environment so that people can go there?
Yeah, I think it's with Serge, for instance, like when we open a Wagner text, I think we're more efficient. We have more and more keys to understand, and like things are easier. And yes, we are developing techniques, and my way of working in opera in general, but in Wagner in particular, is of course I'm developing my methods, and I'm becoming more efficient at a number of things. But essentially, why am I keep doing Wagner? It's not because it's becoming easier. Actually, it's not. Like I think this one is difficult in its own way, and there's always a great level of challenge. The reason why I'm doing Wagner, one, is the music. When I accept to do an opera like Lohengrin, like I did 5 years ago, it means that this music I will be in my daily life for 5, 6, 8, 10, 12. Like we're remounting Parsifal in a few years, and the score is still on my desk 15 years later. So entering into a piece like this is probably even more impactful than buying a house. This is where I live. I live in that music. I live in that text. I live with these characters. But music, if I have any kind, I've been offered a lot of other operas.
I just want to ask if you have any Russian composer with whom you would like to live.
Yes, of course. Like I started with Stravinsky, Oedipus Rex, Symphony of Psalms, and Stravinsky is like, he's Stravinsky. He's Russian, but he's also extraterrestrial.
Sure.
He is an incredible music mind, and that made my... Yes, I could live in Stravinsky forever. Shostakovich, Prokofiev, Rachmaninov. I'm studying a piece for Rachmaninov, from Rachmaninov, that completely takes my brain, my heart. Yes, I love the Russian composers, and I hope I'll direct a Russian opera at one point.
Will be interesting. As you are doing this production as a co-production, and you have to address the spectators, you think that spectators in Russia and in the United States will have different opinion on that production?
Well, probably, because the sensibilities differ from... also, the context is a little different. I think, well, in both cases, we're talking about highly educated audience, like and the Bolshoi is even more... there's so much tradition here. I would like to think that even the level of awareness for opera and music in general is probably higher here. 250 years, I'm going to be playing in a stage where there were singers 250 years ago. That for me is completely surreal. I think I feel the ghost in every corner of this theater, and it's very humbling and exciting. But in the Met, probably the difference is that the Met, there's a better knowledge of Wagner. Mm-hmm. Here, like Lohengrin, as you said, hasn't been played since 1936, and it's true for most of his. And there's all sort of reasons for that are, understandable.
On that stage, on historic stage, the last time we had Wagner, it was staged by Eisenstein. And Eisenstein, he wanted to create a very special sound, and he wanted to put some contemporary music amplifier around the corridors, around the historic stage, to make this Valkyrie flight more powerful on the audience. So this technical advance didn't work. He had to abandon it. But do you have some sort of technical progress incorporated in our production to create the illusions?
We are, I think we're using the standard theater techniques to create all sort of illusions. In this particular case, I don't think we're groundbreaking in any kind of theater techniques, but I'm working with David Finn, the lighting designer that is at the top of his game and manipulates the light. He always surprises me, and Peter Flaherty with video is, I think we're pushing it into places that are, but essentially it's poetical work. Like I don't think in my previous work, Flying Dutchman, we did some groundbreaking, experimental, new technology, video content. In here, we're playing a magic sky, and that is in continuity with Parsifal.
But of course, with Wagner, so much political power is imposed on him because of Hitler, let's say, even misused of some of his music and how he appropriated his music. But do you think that generally art influenced politics and politics influence art?
Yeah, absolutely. I think these are different levels of consciousness where human beings meet. Politics is being one, art being another. I think, and especially in the case of Wagner, Wagner was very active politically and
participated in revolution himself.
Yeah, and like Lohengrin is actually, when we're talking about, like it has an aspect of unification of Germany in Lohengrin. But if you have to look at it in the context of the 1850s in Germany, where the Prussians were in power, and Wagner wanted to, as many other revolutionaries, wanted to retrieve what they considered their own, and he was a revolutionary, and he had to exile himself. As a matter of fact, it took Liszt, who will become his father-in-law. Liszt premiered the piece, and Wagner had to wait 11 years before he himself could attend a performance of his Lohengrin. So the piece had been played 11 years without the composer being able to hear it. So we're talking about a pretty compromised situation. So the notion that Wagner is a dominator or some kind of a power figure is pretty. He was like on his knees most of the time, like and on the margins of politics and exiled, and then it becomes complex because yes, he became a figure for an inspiration for some of the Nazi heads, Himmler, Goebbels, Hitler, and then it tinted his work. But now, like we need to, like we can't retro-engineer the work. Like like what people make of that work later is the responsibility of these people. Wagner has, in my eyes, is completely German and has like all sort of like debatable behavior in politics and as a human being. That being said, he has no responsibility in the Nazi philosophies. And even if we consider anti-Semitism, like there's an excellent book by Alex Ross, the New Yorker's critic, called Wagnerism. And Alex Ross, being a Jew himself and an incredible critic and musicologist, looks at 150 years of ripple effects of Wagner's work. And it's very interesting because I think it clarifies a lot of things. I think the justifiable resistance that Russia might have had toward Wagner from the war on is completely understandable.
But my question is rather about yourself.
But now, like I mean, like even Russia is like I mean, with the time as been passed, I think we're able to look at make a better separation between the German Nazi Reich and Wagner, which are two completely, I wouldn't say completely separate phenomenon, but like I mean, we have a better level of separations. As for myself, I think
not about Wagner, about your perception of art and politics, how it can influence each other, what the role of art in today's world, rather about this.
Art is politics, has to be politics. If it's not, then we're not. I think we have to, like art is speaking in literature or in music, or we are talking about the world we live in, and we find ways to express ideas, comments, and criticism about what surrounds us. Our staging, I think, is if there's any idea that we are in the poetry of our staging, I think we're looking at a future that is the consequence of our current denial. And we see it. We all live in denial of what's coming. And then I think this production is, in its own way, a reminder of what might await us if we do nothing about the global warming, about a lot of things. And
what worries you most in the today world? I mean, of course, you have some quite big life paths, as I did, and you lived in the end of 20th century, and now 21st century comes with all this technology advances, etc.
What worries me most at this moment, like I think we're all very obsessed with COVID, and I think for the good reasons, like, you know, it was disrupted the life on Earth at a major level, I think like never before. But I think a bigger disruption at this moment for me, and a more threatening one, is the what came with social medias, and how suddenly people can convince a really large number of people that the Earth is flat. It was not the sun that was going around the Earth, but the Earth going around the sun, and that we had this planetary system, and we developed science, and we went very far into sophisticating technologies, and now we have these wonderful little phones and little screens that are so smart, and the product of so much ingenuity, but become the platform of ignorance. And that paradox, that dilemma, I think is way more threatening than COVID. I think right now we're facing a great level of political dysfunction due to the annihilation of voices.
Well, unfortunately, time runs out. My last question is, as a director, what is the most great pleasure for you on the work? To be on the rehearsal, to work with particular singers or artists as you did in the film, or to stay there on the premiere evening and see that the whole world you created is now existing on stage and audience experience what you wanted them to experience?
Well, I have to say that my real payday is like, I'm going to a rehearsal now, and I'm, look, you know, when I have like an ensemble of 5 soloists like pouring their arts out with 130 choristers behind them, we don't have the orchestra yet, and it's already like a goosebump experience. These are great, incredible moments of joy, sheer joy, and I'm not talking about, yes, of course, to share with an audience is the ultimate goal, but from my own selfish quality of life, like rehearsing right now and hearing those voices. We actually have 3 choruses here, with fine choristers. When they actually, it's almost like a 747 taking off, and it has this power of lifting your soul. And when I have that in the rehearsal room, I feel they probably selfishly think for 1 second that it's singing for me. But whoever they're singing for, like the power of that is immense. The human voice, elevated at that level of sophistication, is really, really rewarding.
Thank you very much. I wait impassionately for our premiere.
Thank you. Thank you.